Welcome to the Church Universal series, where we seek to tell the often untold story of the many groups, outreaches, and apostolates in the Catholic Church which are making a positive difference in the world through their charitable works and prayerful lives. Hello, I'm Father Joseph Mary, and today I'm speaking with members of a group numbering 2.5 million members in 182 nations. My guests today are John Mundell and Elizabeth Garlow, who are members of the Focolare Movement, who will be talking today about what makes the Focolare Movement so attractive to young people. And we'll also be talking about the 2010 beatification of one of their young members. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Now, John, the Focolare Movement has been in the United States for over 50 years. Has working with young people always been part of the mission?
Well, absolutely has been part of the mission from the very beginning. In fact, I would say it's almost just the opposite. Young people have been willing to work with the older people. You know, the Focolare Movement started in northern Italy during World War II with a group of young girls, all under the age of 23. The founder of the Focolare, whose name was Cattleu Luce, discovered this reality of the immense love of God, and the women that joined her in this kind of adventure at that time desired to kind of love God back because of this love that they felt, and began living the lines of the gospel during the bombings and the destruction that happened during World War II. This intensity of their life, which developed into a spirituality of communion, attracted many people, including people, well, my age at this time, but many older people. And within a few months, you know, there were 500 people following these young girls. Wow. So this call to unity, where one of the objectives of the Focolare is to follow that last testament of Jesus, Father, may they all be one, that is found in the Gospels. This call is very attractive to young people. In fact, my wife and I, back 36 years ago, at the university, at Purdue University, met the Focolare Movement, and were so struck by the people trying to live the gospel that we wanted to also follow this way. So it's been part and parcel of the Focolare's spiritual movement, as well as the activities that youth have been involved.
Now, how did you see them living it? You were at Purdue University. What did you see in them that you were especially attracted to?
Well, at the time, we were at a meeting called a Word of Life meeting, where we sat around and we read a line of the gospel every month, and we would put it into practice. And what my wife and I were amazed at were the stories that would come back. There was a Purdue professor who had small children at the time. He was a young man at the time, and he had trouble loving his children one day, for example. They were being very unlovable, as you know, as children can be sometimes. Right. And he decided to love them out of his love for God. And my wife and I thought, wow, he is changing his behavior because of his relationship with God. And so these little experiences of living the gospel and putting into practice the words of Jesus in our day-to-day lives converted us. They're not, you know, significant episodes always. They're small things, small choices. So that was very attractive to us.
To see it actually being lived out and affecting somebody's life. Yes.
That's right. I mean, we both my wife and I took some courses in theology, and we went to Bible studies and that sort of thing. And of course, those things are absolutely essential, as well as going to Mass every week, saying the Rosary. But something about this lifestyle that calls us into action was very attractive.
Now, Elizabeth, you are a young lady. You're part of the Focolare Youth Movement. How is it something that nurtures your own faith and that you see nurtures the faith of other young people?
That's right. Well, I've had the privilege of being raised and formed in the Focolare Movement for the last 15 plus years. I actually came into contact with the Focolare youth during a sports weekend, is what we called it. I was in middle school, I was an athlete, I loved playing sports, and the Focolare organized an event whereby young people were actually organizing games and athletic activities during which they would try to put into practice the gospel way of life, loving. So what John was talking about, this sort of gospel in action. And that really struck me. And I felt like it was something that I could live as the person that I was. And so the gospel in action piece is, I think, one core aspect of the youth formation activities of the Focolare. Another is this really training and formation in dialogue. So as our Holy Father is calling us to today, this culture of encounter with one another, these tools and these our ability to enter into dialogue with one another, I think, is increasingly important. And the Focolare helps form us as individuals, as young people who are able to dialogue with people of different faiths, different cultures, through a couple of different things. We organize weekend retreats. We also have actual schools of formation in retreat centers all around the world. I had spent 9 months in a retreat center of the Focolare Movement in Lopiano, Italy, where I lived and worked in a community of about 60 women from over 30 countries. Wow. So you can imagine the negotiations on a day-to-day basis. Yes. But it was this real life schooling and dialogue. We also do global gatherings all over the world where we come together to try and give testament to this lifestyle of unity that the Focolare seeks to promote. One such event is the Gen Fest. It's a global gathering of youth that takes place to try and encourage and build solidarity through acts of cultural exchange, art, and then dialoguing on difficult topics in light of the gospel. So 2.5 years ago, I traveled to Budapest, Hungary, to participate in this global Gen Fest gathering, and it was the experience of a lifetime, I can tell you that.
And it seems to me that that's something very dear to young people's hearts. They don't want to be separated from one another, hating one another, having war with one another. That young people have this desire for solidarity, for union with others, and to understand and to love each other. Do you find that in young people's hearts? Absolutely.
I think the beauty of youth in part is it's our idealism, right?
Yes.
We can see an ideal of unity because we can first and foremost see each other as human persons and identify what we might have in common. And I think those principles and those acts of solidarity and communion with one another are so needed in the world today. If we think about a lot of our global conflicts that we're facing, at the heart of that is a lack of communion. And so I think young people have this thirst and can give testament to what the world might look like if we actually did live in solidarity with one another.
And to have some little experience of that when your global gatherings that you have. And we're going to look at one of those right now on the video that they put together of a global gathering of young people in Budapest.
Since I've been up here, I realized that there are no boundaries in the world. The world is one. The idea that on Earth there are people who are fighting, killing and being killed for the power of being in one place rather than another is an absolutely alien view from here. This is how the astronaut Luca Parmitano commented on his first walk in space. The world seen from a new perspective, a united world. This is the challenge of the United World Project, promoted by the international association New Humanity, expression of the social and cultural commitment of the Focolare Movement, founded by Cattleu Luce and spread around the world. The aim of the project is to develop a new culture that revalues the idea and the experience of universal brotherhood, not only in the consistency of the activities of daily living, but also in the approach to education at the cultural level to restore peace and a more humane living conditions among all peoples. Cattleu Luce writes, "The strong contradictions that mark our age need a penetrating and incisive point of orientation, categories of thought and action capable of involving every individual, as well as all peoples with their economic, social and political systems. There's a universal idea which is already in place, and an experience that's proving to be able to support the burden of this epochal challenge, universal brotherhood." pioneers of the project are the Youth for a United World, the young people of the Focolare Movement. At the end of August 2012, 12,000 young people from 125 countries met in Budapest for the 10th edition of the Gen Fest, their world gathering. 500,000 more are connected via streaming. They invade the city with the slogan, "Let's Bridge." They commit themselves to building bridges of brotherhood among cultures and peoples, giving voice to the need to rediscover each other as sisters and brothers, to put the person, relationships, and gratuitousness at the center of politics, culture, economy, and science. As evidence of their commitment, in Elizabeth Square, in the heart of the city of Pest, the corner of universal fraternity is inaugurated.
Here we are at the inauguration of the fraternity place. This place it symbolizes the 5 continents and the fraternity of all the people living in the world.
On 5 marble benches in 20 languages, including Braille, the Golden Rule is carved, common precept to the major religions and cultures of the world. One should treat others as one would like to be treated by others.
Proponiamo un patto mondiale di fraternità. Lanciamo il United World Project.
It is in this context that the Youth for a United World launch the United World Project, which aims to turn universal brotherhood into the new cornerstone of politics, economics, work, sports, environmental protection, communication, science, and art. Through the creation of a global network, we've set up a permanent and international observatory to study, collect, and promote actions of fraternity all over the world. The United World Week, sponsored since 1996 by the Youth for a United World, is a real exhibition of universal brotherhood. An opportunity to propose initiatives of fraternity to the institutions and have an impact on the public opinion of the countries where it takes place. During the United World Week in Nairobi in 2004, the Atlas of Universal Fraternity was presented, the first dossier of the United World Project, made in collaboration with a study group made up of teachers and students of the Sophia University. A historical and geographical mapping that collects examples of fraternity lived on every latitude, seeds of fraternity. Seeds, because most of the times it's about little actions which may involve a neighborhood, a house for the elderly, a school, or a specific family. Their aim is bringing comfort, love, warm-heartedness where there's coldness, lack of understanding, and hatred. Starting from little actions, but with a large perspective, universal brotherhood. In the first 2 months of the project, we've identified over 800 seeds of fraternity, promoted by young people from all continents.
Seeds of fraternity, 800 seeds of fraternity. And you think of a seed as something very small, little acts of love, of communion, of unity that can grow into something beautiful and very good. What are some examples of ways that young people do get involved in the works of the church?
Well, I think we just saw one that was very interesting. In fact, this United World Project we just saw last week was named with the Luxembourg Peace Prize. So again, little acts, small things that young people do recognized by world governments is very significant. In the Focolare, we've had the experience of youth within the Focolare getting involved in a number of things. I can give my own life as an example. My wife and I met as young people at the university and have continued a lifetime of work in the church as people that help families in interreligious dialogue, in liturgy and Mass. So again, this involvement called us to continue to be heavily involved with the church. We also have involvement in religious vocations. Many of our young people go on to take religious vocations as priests and religious, as consecrated people. My own daughter lives in a Focolare community as a consecrated person in New York, where she's also a journalist for the magazine Living City for the Focolare. Others are involved in things like business, where they go and they become involved in internships as part of this economy of communion project the Focolare has that tries to bring the life of the gospel into living business. So many young people are attracted to how do we find meaning in business nowadays when we see all these kind of other difficulties in business. And finally, they are also involved in various projects around the world that Elizabeth will talk a little bit more about.
Just a moment about your own daughter. You said that she's living a consecrated life in the Focolare movement. Talk a little bit about how that's lived out, that there are those who consecrate themselves to this work, to God.
Yes, people call them Focolarini.
Okay.
In fact, Pope John Paul II liked to talk about the Focolarini and their support of his ministry. But at some point, a young person can say, I want to give my life totally to this ideal of unity. Mm-hmm. The Focolare spirituality of unity is much like a charism. It's a charism of the church that is for everyone. And so people feel a special calling to give everything to God. And so my daughter, after World Youth Day 2000, understood that for her, this may be her way of life. And so she went through a school of formation in Lopiano, Italy for 2 years, and then was assigned to, her first assignment was in Argentina, then in the United States. But, and also, married people can also even hear this call. So we have both single and married people living in community in some locations around the world.
Elizabeth, other examples?
Well, I think the video that we just saw a little bit ago mentioned the United World Week, which is, again, this global demonstration of solidarity. What I think is so unique about the experience as a young person in the Focolare is that it's both local and global at the same time. So on a local level, you're meeting and interacting with people who share these ideals, but then you're part of this global network of people. And that's a really powerful sentiment to recognize this sort of collective action that can change the world. Another good example of that is something that we call Run for Unity. It's a 24/7 event that takes place over a period of time where young people literally run races in demonstration of solidarity with other young people around the world who might be living through difficult conflict or situations or circumstances. So it's both an opportunity to raise awareness as well as to do something concrete that really helps build relationships along the way.
Well, let's talk about the recent young lady who was beatified in 2010. She died in 1990, just short of her 19th birthday. And she was a member of the Focolare Gen movement, a Blessed Chiara Badano. Talk about her.
That's right. Well, Blessed Cattleu Luce Badano has certainly touched my life in very meaningful ways and the lives of many young people in the Focolare movement. She met the Focolare movement when she was about 9 years old, and she was, as you mentioned, a Gen. And we call young people in the Focolare Gen to signify new generation of people that, again, are committed to building unity. And I think immediately upon meeting the Focolare, she was really taken with its call to live unity, to bring unity into the world. And she was born in Castello, Italy. She was a normal teenager, like many of us. She loved swimming and tennis. She played music. She really liked hip hop, and she lived her life in close relationship with the other Gen of the Focolare movement. And one day, when she was playing tennis, she noticed a sharp pain in her shoulder. She was 17 at the time. Didn't think much of it initially, but as that pain persisted, she had some tests and received a diagnosis of bone cancer. And her immediate response was, Jesus, if you want this, then I want it too. And she really, throughout her life, emanated this tremendous light and this tremendous love for Jesus. In fact, when she was 16, Chiara Lubick, the founder of the Focolare, gave her this name, Cattleu Luce. Luce means light. And she gave her this name because she said, your face is so luminous. It really shows a love for Jesus. So throughout her illness, over 2 years of treatment for her bone cancer, what was so noteworthy about Cattleu Luce is that she lived her life as part of this Focolare community. She journeyed towards sainthood together with the other young people of the Focolare movement. So she would write them letters and tell them about her experiences with the treatments and everything that she was able to give to God over and over. She would say, "For you, Jesus, for you, Jesus." And I remember reading at one point, some other young people of the Focolare said, we would go to visit her to try and lift up her spirits, but in reality, it was the opposite. She would lift our spirits. Yes. She would bring us closer to God through her experience of journeying through this illness, really not just accepting, but loving and embracing the will of God. And as she was getting ready, when she realized that the treatment would no longer work, she started planning her funeral with her mother, and she asked to be buried in a white dress with a pink sash and said, "This is going to be my wedding. It's my feast day. I'm going to marry Jesus. I want it to be a celebration." So really just an incredible testament of a young person who really challenged us to think about being saints now, today, and together with one another.
I liked what you said last night about the communion with those who are suffering. So the Gen members came to visit her, but they felt, blessed by her hope, by her joy. But they had a communion together, and that's an important point when you think about the whole euthanasia movement, and this is growing. It's kind of like isolating yourself and deciding that I'm going to end my life, the way that I think it has dignity. Where this is saying, what Chiara is saying to us is, no, suffering has a meaning. Jesus, if you want this, then I want this too. And that there's this communion that she experienced with the Focolare spirituality.
That's right. In the Focolare movement, we speak often of Jesus forsaken. Jesus in his moment on the cross when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And that moment of really deep suffering that Jesus experienced there, we try to offer our own sufferings in unity with the suffering that Jesus experienced on the cross. And Cattleu Luce, throughout her illness and her treatment, often would say, "I choose Jesus forsaken as my spouse." And really had this special love for Jesus forsaken. So she saw the transformative value of suffering, and it certainly transformed her own life, but definitely the lives of many people, close family and friends that were around her.
So she came to learn how to deal with her own sufferings through what she had learned from the Focolare movement and so on. What were some of the virtues you think that she picked up from the Focolare spirituality that helped her to cope with this even joyfully?
That's right. Yeah, I think three things come to mind. So this recognition that suffering can have value, even beyond what we might see ourselves, that God can take our suffering and do beautiful things with it. Another is the present moment. We talk a lot in the Focolare movement about living the will of God in each present moment. And I think Cattleu Luce really journeyed through her illness with that recognition that in each moment she would have the grace to live her suffering and live that experience, that will of God very well. And then the third is the collective spirituality, this understanding that the Focolare shares with us that we journey toward God together. We journey towards sainthood together. And so that's, her life is obviously a beautiful example of that.
Now, how does the Focolare movement equip young people now as we go forward for the good and the future of the world? What do you think?
I think we have a couple of examples. One I'd like to talk about is something called the Cube of Love.
Yes,
we have one on the table. It's a simple cube. It's based on something that Chiara Lubick, the foundress of the Focolare, came up with called the art of loving. And what it does is it takes simple sentences about our spiritual life and put them on each side of a cube. And then you roll the cube every day and you read what comes up to the top. And for example, it says, "Love everyone."
So that's what we have to do today.
We have to do today.
Put it into practice.
As you're listening to me, you have to love me, and we're listening to Elizabeth. The other ones are, love one another. Be the first to love. Share the other's joy and hurts.
Right.
So it's a kind of a simple program, but this is used all over the United States in public and Catholic schools with children, where they roll the cube at the beginning of the school day, and then they live that out, and then they share the experiences, much like the young girls did when they were trying to live the gospel back in Trent. about how they did that. So that's one little thing that really connects well with young people, especially the young children.
Well, we're coming to the close here, but if people want to learn more about the Focolare movement, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, certainly the easiest way is if you Google Focolare, you'll see us on the web. But Focolare.org is the international website, and there's different languages. Select the English one. There are Focolare communities all over the United States. And if you, again, get on either the web or Facebook, you'll also be able to be put in contact. Anything else, Elizabeth, I think?
Focolare.us has all sorts of updates about activities going on in different regions of this country, so folks can go there and hopefully plug right in.
Excellent. You've been wonderful examples of the Focolare movement, so thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
St. Paul writes that God gives a variety of gifts and inspires a variety of services for the common good. So what gifts has He given to you? And what service has He inspired in you? Perhaps you too hear the call as a young person like Blessed Cattleu Luce Badano to work and pray for unity in the world by being part of the Focolare movement. May God bless and guide you and make us all instruments of His peace. See you again this time next week for another episode of the Church Universal.